Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Foxhole feed. Happy Friday to everybody. Lots of gaming news to go over, lots of industry news, lots of development news, lots of numbers. You guys know how much I like numbers. Lots of semi-game news. There's some semi-game news that's still related to gaming nonetheless. So let's just get into it. Now, in our crazy development news here, Metal Gear Solid 5, it was revealed that Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain has grossed more than twice that of the Avengers Age of Ultron in the same time frame, mind you. So MGS5 is, these numbers were pulled from some site, was revealed to had pulled $179 million dollars compared to Avengers Age of Ultron, which pulled in $84 million in terms of global sales, which is actually pretty good, for a game like this. Though lots of people are citing how amazing that is that this game did these great numbers, you have to factor that a game is really only as successful to a company in comparison to how much their asses had to spend on it. A game making lots of money doesn't mean anything, just like anybody making lots of money doesn't really mean anything. In terms of business, it has more to do with, how much did you make then? That's what it has to do with a lot of things in business. They need to know that they made their return back. I mean, Konami made their return back on this game. I'm not really sure, actually. I don't know if the $80 million that they spent on MGS5 has ever been a confirmed number. None of us know how much they really spent on Metal Gear Solid 5. They could have spent more. We don't really know whether more or less. I don't know if anybody's ever really stated the 100% complete cost of everything that it took. I don't know if they said that. I feel some of these movies I truly feel some of these movies have more legs than games sometimes, because how significantly games lower in price. I mean, these films are going to gross a lot of this money at the box office, and then they're going to go on to make money on DVD, and then they're going to go on to make money, on streaming services. They're going to go on to continue having long legs with that, Age of Ultron film. Now, not to say MGS5 cannot continue to have long legs as well. It 100% will continue to sell and continue to make money for, a good while. Since MGS series got to have some long legs, I see it continuing for a very long time. Like I stated before in my previous podcast episodes, or my previous newscast episodes, I don't fault Konami for the situation that arose from MGS5. I mean, if it's taking them 7 years and they're spending $80+ million on 5 platforms and they're not seeing Call of Duty money or Assassin's Creed money, I mean, if I was them as a company, I would do the same thing and call it quits and decide to go another route financially, But yeah, I mean, it's what it is. Now, could a sequel to Until Dawn possibly be coming? According to Supermassive Games and Sony, very much so. Now, Sony has been very vocal about their surprise hit of Until Dawn in terms of being surprised at how well it did, and not necessarily marketing it, as that was a whole thing that went on a couple weeks ago regarding Sony's statements about this game. Now, Sony's statements were more or less that they didn't really market it as much as they would other titles based on not necessarily knowing how well it was going to do. Now, before anybody gets, too pissed off and flames them for, not marketing the title enough or whatever, you have to factor that this is a hard game to market. I mean, I've used the example before that if you list something like Until Dawn, and you show a trailer for it, and you also show a trailer for, something like The Evil Within, I mean, at first glance, both of these games look extremely similar. At first glance, both of these games, in their first trailer form, look like they're offering the very same things. They're two drastically different games that, still market themselves in these trailers to be extremely similar to each other. It's hard to to tell what a game is going to be like just by seeing the trailer of it. So the thing that sold me on Until Dawn, that got me purchasing this game day one, was essentially seeing what it was like at E3 and having them do, you know, a whole playthrough and telling you, you know, word per word, hey, look, this game is like da 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 da. That's what got me, you know, playing that game. Not its first trailer. Its first trailer wasn't bad looking. It wasn't anything that was making me, you know, say like I didn't want it or I didn't know what it was, as much as it was like I could understand how somebody could get confused about what it might actually be. Now, in order to think this way, you literally have to just escape from your mind that you've already played it. I've already played and beaten the game. You have to escape that you've played and beaten it. Don't think about it in that respect, and try to imagine that you don't know what this game is like. And just look at the trailer that I'm going to link both trailers below, and look at both of the trailers and honestly tell me, if you never played either of these two games, that you wouldn't assume that both of them would be very similar to each other. They're vastly different to each other. So both of them are telling you stuff like, you know, you gotta survive this madman, and you know, and they're showing you all these pretty graphics and showing all these crazy action sequences. But it's like those action sequences are, you know, ruled by the QTE of the game. You have to survive, yes, but only in a strange sense that you have to survive all games. And Evil Within, that's not the case. And Evil Within, you really do have to survive this game. Limited ammo, limited health, limited many things. So it is a survival horror. This isn't a survival horror. Until Dawn is nothing like a survival horror. Can they say and use the tagline, oh, you gotta survive? Of course, it markets the game. It makes sense on why you would tell them that. But if you listen to it the way you normally hear those terms with a horror game, you might apply something like Resident Evil understandings to it in terms of survival. That's what you might apply to it. So it's hard to market it because it's a new IP. It's very difficult to market. Yes, Heavy Rain was similar to it, and Beyond Two Souls is similar to it. It doesn't make it any easier to market to gamers, I think, though. This is something where E3 is what sold it to me. Now, besides all the marketing stuff in terms of them questioning how they were going to market it, besides any of that, them stating that they want to do a sequel, and they're pretty much all but confirming it, because what they state is, you know, they got an interview here that I'll link to you from PlayStation Lifestyle with them stating, you know, is Until Dawn 2 being considered? And he thinks, and the person who's the executive producer at, you know, Supermassive Games states, I think that you should expect the team to build, you know, on what we've done with Until Dawn. I mean, so that's essentially telling you in a nutshell that that's, you know, they are making it. They are doing a sequel, and that if it's not called Until Dawn 2, it's just going to be, you know, in the same vein of Until Dawn. A new cast of characters, a different setting. I've read many people state that they want it to sort of be like American Horror Story, the show, in terms of, you know, you got a different cast of characters, a different horror setting, a different whatever. I like that idea. I think that idea is awesome, and I think it helps the game. This is not a game that lends to all the characters. It's not a game that it strictly lives and dies with the characters in the game. The characters are great. The performance stuff is awesome. But the characters that are in the game are not so much so the game that without them, you cannot play another game again. If they give you a whole new cast of characters and these guys have just as good, you know, performances, I'll buy the next game in a heartbeat. It's surprisingly one of my favorite games this year. I didn't think it was going to be as good. It surprised me. I love the game and I cannot recommend it anymore. It's a great game. I could just recommend it to the, you know, cows come home. I love the game. If you have not played it, do yourself a favor and pick this title up. Very fun, very refreshing, and it's similar to The Walking Dead. The actions you make are absolute. You make the decision, it happens, you live with it, and that's the fun of this game, is living with those decisions and seeing where do they take you at the ending of the game. Now, another developer news. EA has released some statements regarding their current financial situation and their current development plans for the future. Now, earlier this generation, EA confirmed that they had several, you know, new IPs that were in the works. one of those new IPs. I believe BioWare is making one of those new IPs. They have several teams that are out there doing some stuff. Now, this is just, before I get into all of that, just regarding Battlefield. Now, what EA states is that, Battlefield support developer, which is actually Dice LA, is leading a new game, and their new game is highly likely that they will be, doing their own game. Lots of people are questioning that, maybe this is BF5, but the way it sounds like EA is wording it, that it may not actually be of an existing IP. He says that, I have no doubt that Dice LA will be building their game at some point because it's really, really passionate group of people. It doesn't really say Battlefield, does not state whether it's a continuation of the Battlefield series. Nothing like that's really stated. Now, because that's the only title that we know of this team working on has been the Battlefield series in terms of creating DLC for them. It's a safe bet to say maybe they're working on their own Battlefield game. Because for all we know, DICE could be making BF5 right now. And EA might have had this team that was always assisting them in terms of patches, updates, and post-launch content, because Visceral and, Dice LA both worked on Battlefield 4 in terms of creating maps for it. So who knows? Visceral helped and, created, a Battlefield game, so it's not that unlikely that Dice LA might, also be making a Battlefield game. I'm hesitant to say that because I do want, Dice in Sweden to actually make Battlefield 5. That's what I hope that it's currently going on, since they're a huge team. That team is currently working on Star Wars Battlefront, on top of working on Mirror's Edge, on top of what I believe likely working on Battlefield 5 right now. So though I believe that Dice LA could be making a Battlefield game, it's starting to sound like maybe that's not the case. They're not really leaning to say that it's something regarding Battlefield. Who knows? So this next statement is going to, make it sound like even more so that this title may not be Battlefield in terms of where the direction they're going. Now, this other news tidbit stating that EA is building lots of new IPs, gigantic action games, etc., etc. It's not really news to people, and if it is news to you, then, I'll state it anyway. Jade Raymond, who used to work at Ubisoft, who helped start the Assassin's Creed series, is working at EA, and also, Amy Hennig, which also worked on the Uncharted series. She's the writer of the Uncharted series, is working with EA as well. She's working with BioWare, I believe. Either with BioWare, her own team, but I'm almost positive it's BioWare that I believe she was working with. Now, it could be Visceral. It's either BioWare or Visceral. One of the two studios that's currently going to be making another Star Wars game. One of these two, actually both studios are making a Star Wars game, but it's one of these two. Regardless, she's going to be working with her to create a new IP. So EA goes to state that, they're suggesting that they want to do something. They're going after something like GTA, something that sells like 50 million units. We would love to. So they're saying that, and they says they absolutely, want those type of absolutely AAA, big productions, or what we want to do is what EA states. Now, they bring up a really, 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 really good point. They state that they don't really make action games. And when I look at EA's portfolio, I start to realize that they actually kind of don't. So Mirror's Edge is sort of its own thing. And EA has a really, really diverse portfolio. And what's strange is the biggest, I would say, genre within the industry in terms of just action games, they don't really have a lot of them. And I can't even name any to you, to be quite honest with you. So, they have the BioWare stuff in terms of, Mass Effect, and then they have the Star Wars, KOTOR stuff with the online stuff, and then they have all their sports games, and then they have the racing games, and then they have the Battlefield series, and, Mirror's Edge doesn't really fall into that. So I don't know what I could say would be their action game. So they sort of are correct. I would say Army of Two was their first and only go at making an attempt at that, and then when they had Dead Space, which was their horror stuff. So it's like they're sort of a little bit everywhere, but action seemed to be something that I realized that when they brought it up, that they kind of were lacking that. So EA doesn't have an open world, crazy type game, and EA also doesn't have an action game. So it seems like the new IPs that they were talking about that they want, that they stated in the beginning of the generation that they're working on, those could be very well the ones that are going to be releasing. Visceral could be working on that, on top of clearly Star Wars project that they're going to be working on. So who knows? So no one really knows what's going to go on with those two projects in terms of the Star Wars games. Maybe the action game that they're referring to in terms of a new IP is a Star Wars game, because in some respect you can say that a new IP, though coming from a franchise that exists, is still a new IP. It's still a new idea, a new thought. You could say Star Wars 1313. Yes, it's from a franchise that exists. In terms of a game form, it is a new IP, and people will see it and define it as a new IP. They will not try to see it as something they already know or they're familiar of. You're not. Regardless of what the franchise is, when you go into something like Star Wars and you have a team making a Star Wars game that is a game you've never played before, it's a new IP, and that's how I believe EA might be stating this. So Jade Raymond working with Amy Hennig on in Visceral. Well, I think it's Visceral. I'm going to lean on it, guys, and say it's Visceral that she's working with Visceral, because I think I would have remembered if she was working in BioWare. So she's working with her on their Star Wars project, which is going to be their action-y Star Wars game. I don't think it'll be an RPG. Can't be a multiplayer game. If they're going to lean towards one, it's going to be that, and that's what sounds like EA is talking about. In terms of the open world game that EA seems to be working on, that they're alluding that they really want, I don't know who could be working on that. And I've even theorized that what if they're bringing back that Mercenary series that was for the PlayStation 2. So if you guys remember that series, it was sort of like what Just Cause is today, which is actually really weird. Sort of like Just Cause. It was sort of exactly like what you're saying. Mercenaries, open world, take a contract, kill these people any way you feel like it, and big explosions. And there was this big tattoo guy with the beard and a mohawk and everything on the cover and stuff. But maybe that's the case. Who knows? As of right now, I don't really have too many guesses. I could only state that they're talking about Star Wars stuff, because even with BioWare, we know BioWare's working on a Star Wars game. And when BioWare showed off the Frostbite engine, when they showed off the Frostbite engine and first showed Mass Effect in terms of showing footage of it, they also talked about a new IP and showed footage of assets and certain stuff that were working, or engine stuff. And something tells me that if EA is going to talk about a new IP and it's actually a Star Wars game, it's very likely that they've talked about both the IPs we know of being made by these two teams are Star Wars games, and that EA telling you that they want an action game, they want an open world game, might be their way of saying that those are the two Star Wars projects that are going to be coming up next. Now, Capcom earlier was talking about them, rebooting the Resident Evil series and splitting the series into action and horror. Apparently, they also want to reboot their CG junk. So Capcom stated earlier this week that they want to reboot their their CG Resident Evil series. And they announced, earlier that they want to have, they're announcing a brand new Resident Evil, basically CG movie. This would be the third Resident Evil CG movie. If you guys had not seen Degeneration and Resident Evil Damnation's not as good, but they're actually really good CG movies that surround the Resident Evil series, that in my personal opinion, even with being kind of cheesy, they're actually way better than the live action movies. But neither here or there. Subjective. Maybe you guys don't agree with that, but I don't really care for them. Now, this is going to be headed by a CG team called Marza Animation. Marza does the animation or the CG work for Sega, for a lot of the Phantasy Star stuff, and most of a lot of their series CG work is done by this team. So they're a pretty well-respected team in terms of CGI animated stuff. The script is being done by the Psycho Pass writer. If you guys don't know Psycho Pass, check it out on Netflix. Go to anime. And that the director of The Grudge, yes, Takashi Shimizu, is going to actually be doing the production. He's going to be exclusive executive producer, which is kind of cool. The Ju-On series being pretty big deal in Japan of the nerds. So if you guys know that over here from The Grudge, Really, really good series. So they got a good producer behind it. Doesn't really look like they have a solid release. They got a window. The release window is 2017, but that's about it. No fall, no beginning. No one really knows. They also state that they got a live action film in the work dubbed Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. And I do not care about that at all. It means nothing to me. Now, and finally, since it's Friday, I try to hit you guys with a little bit of fun facts, but I also like to try to hit you guys with some Twitter stuff. I don't even remember if I did one last week, but I'll try to do what I'm reading up on some of the people that I follow on Twitter and some of the stuff that I read a lot on. Now, Hideki Kamiya, extremely outspoken director, always in people's faces, no fucks being given at all. Now, somebody, tweets to Hideki Kamiya, and, he tweets and states, do you think Okami have to be a character in another Smash Bros? Now, I'm sure he probably means something else, but I'm reading this in translation, so, he probably means something else. But, we know what he's asking. Asking, is Okami going to be a character in Smash Brothers? So, Hideki repeats, he says, I've told you 1,000,000 infinite number of times. I'll block Smash Bros or Smash Idiots immediately. So, no fuck being given. Hideki does not give a fuck, does not like Smash Brothers character, extremely outspoken, says some crazy ass shit against Nintendo, says some crazy ass shit against Sony, and he says some junk against Microsoft, but not as much. He's always saying having these crazy fits. He also hates the Mega Man guy, Kij Inafune. Yeah, Hideki Kamiya absolutely fucking hates that man. Now, speaking Hideki Kamiya, I told you guys I like to hit you guys with a little fun facts on Friday, or hit you just with Twitter, random Twitter stuff that certain developers are saying, whether it be weird, funny news, or just nothing. But hit you with a fun fact for this Friday. Since I don't do episodes on, weekends unless it's some sort of big trade show, on the 17th is going to mark the 14th anniversary of the very first Devil May Cry, created by Hideki Kamiya. So, it's been 14 years since Devil May Cry has graced us. Devil May Cry 1 was actually officially supposed to be a Resident Evil game. It was supposed to be in the Resident Evil series, and it was later changed to be what we now know as Devil May Cry. So the series has went on to do just weird stuff. Like, it's up and down. It's up and down. Like, the first one, amazing game. Second game is complete fucking trash. The third Devil May Cry, absolutely infamous as one of the greatest hack and slash games ever made. And then the fourth one just starts to sort of slowly go downhill. And then the reboot is just complete utter trash. Don't want to see it. Don't even want to fucking talk about that. And before I end it, actually also in other Capcom news, Capcom reveals that they are indeed working on the Devil May Cry game, and they're also working on a Dead Rising game. Now, whether they're going to be good and who's going to be working on them remains to be seen. I just want to know, okay, are they going to be outsourced? We don't, before I jump for excitement, I didn't know who the fuck's making it. That white, I think they're called either Blue Castle Games. They're in like Canada, and they do the Dead Rising stuff. I don't care for them. And I personally do not want to see Ninja Theory do another Devil May Cry game. So I really, really want, pretty please, Capcom, with a cherry on top, don't fucking outsource this crap. I will not play this shit if this shit's outsourced again. Because it's just utter crap. I'm not going to play crap and don't really care. DMC died, when Hideki left that game, DMC died. So, unless in a bizarre, ironic twist of fate, that Hideki Kamiya's Team Platinum took over and, were hired to make the very game that they created. The irony is too amazing. Now, this has been episode 18 of the Foxhole feed. You guys look out for Monday for episode 19. Like, comment, subscribe, and that's game.